This presentation is about governance, responsiveness, and generativity. After all these years of research, these are the 3 points that I want to make about future cities that are very important for the future. I also find it genius how just a short summary to this conference was placed. It's just one abstract part, but you could distill all these things like digital technologies, predictability, controllability, automation, goals, instruments, scientific approaches out of this. And I was so awed by this that I thought, where did I work in those? And it's just the yellow parts. But one part that I really want to focus on, which is not so much in the introduction to this conference, is design. And that's in all these 3 points, governance and responsiveness, embedded. So governance, just a few words to that. In the population here and also other countries, feelings of being irrelevant as a voter occur, the complaints of not being seen or heard by the city's governments. Participatory planning is often mostly seen as information. We just heard that before. And participatory budget planning is rare. It exists, but rare. And a few examples from Switzerland and Singapore will hopefully give you some better idea. Then responsiveness, what is that? Responsiveness is beyond reaction and smartness. That's why I always have a problem with smart cities, with the expression, because I think it's it's not a dead end, but it needs a lot of development for the future. The cities cause 2/3 of climate change, of course, and mobility problems, but responsibility for that is always delegated up to the government or down to the consumers for energy conservation, travel behavior, and so on. So citizens need to see and understand the state of their city, its metabolism and planning scenarios, and they can do that with the means I will represent. And citizens can suggest local solutions to larger problems, and they can co-design and co-manage the city. So that's one step a bit beyond collecting data. And then generativity is creating really new things out of the blue, but with the help of science, of course, and things you don't first need, maybe, but that become very enriching. So today, it's beyond sustainability also. That's the important part. Today, not a single city in the world we claim is sustainable even. And with good governance and responsive citizens, cities can become generative. Generativity means to us to produce with renewable resources more than a city needs and to improve the situation over time, not just to regenerate what was before or keep it as it is, but to really improve it. Generative buildings exist already. Villages, towns, neighborhoods, and cities, they form the generative settlement of the future. And simulation and complexity science are key to this development. So let's start with the future living space, which is another word for the future city, and focus on these 3 areas. The future cities and have to have good governance. They have to be responsive and generative. Good governance. What is that? The purpose of governance is called living together in an affordable environment of safety and trust, culture and joy. And the governance of a city or village is like a little bit the operating system of that community. The governance is a local way of settlement systems and how they are governed. Top-down, bottom-up, autonomous, centralized, decentralized, they're all different versions of it. And I must say, of course, I'm not a pure scientist like many of you are, but I always see it under the aspect of design, of changing or doing something in the future that we are not at yet. I take my personal experience from the places where I lived between the village and the mega city, and being a governance of direct democracy and so-called guided democracy. And you can see Singapore, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Winnipeg, Munich, Berkeley, Eltville, Einsiedeln, Copenhagen, Zurich. These are all places in that big spectrum. And I want to give you a few examples how it is. So the smart city, as we know it, is information and communication technology, ICT, plus big data, and plus artificial intelligence. And of course, AI is age old, 40, 50, 60, 70 years old. We got this great introduction yesterday from Lucas. The first introduction to smart cities many people had already in the 80s, 90s, were these speed traps in cities in Germany and all over the world. But it was a very unfriendly welcome. The first encounter with a city, you were caught speeding or whatever. You didn't know what happened. You saw this flash. Nothing happens. Weeks later, you get an ugly bill. And that was the first interaction of a city with you, a smart city with you. Then, of course, it went beyond these limits to very large smart city like Songdo in Korea, or applications in the United States and Mexico and Brazil and all over the world. But many smart buildings, smart mobility, smart surveillance happen, but are they people-centered and are they people-supported? And here, yesterday's presentations on human-machine system, hyperintelligence for digital democratic processes by Kathleen was very enlightening for me. Thank you very much. And also, of course, Dirk's talk on digital democracy. Is there a future for democracy in a YouTube video from 23? It's also very enlightening in this aspect. We did many researches on smart cities, how smart they are, where they are, and so on, in our research in Singapore and in Zurich. And every year there's a new list of the smartest cities in the world. But I just give two. 2019, after the Forbes ranking, it was Singapore, Hong Kong, and Zurich. Interestingly enough, Zurich was #1 in social cooperation, which for us is a measurement of responsiveness of a city. And also the governing systems of these cities are very different. Singapore as a guided democracy and Hong Kong as a democracy that was just kept for a while, or Zurich like a direct democracy, were very different. And then 2024 IMD new ranking, Zurich #1, Oslo, Canberra, Geneva, Singapore. And you see that the democracy index, the cities with the highest democracy index are in fact at the top, and Singapore has, with a democracy index of 69, gone down a little bit. The important thing for cities governance in the future, as I mentioned before, is an important instrument, is what we call citizen design science. So it's citizen science plus something. There are beautiful examples for that in the past. And it also solves part of the problems that you mentioned before with data protection and so on, because design is an active part of the citizen. It's engagement. It's not just participation or voting, it's more. So we define that as citizen design plus citizen science. Thank you for the great lecture before, and of design science. Citizen design must happen in many places of the world because they have no choice. There's no architects, there's no city to help them. So they have to do these favela planning and building. It has been around in all over Europe for hundreds of years and all over the world. Germany, old buildings, Sudan, buildings made by the citizens, India, Ladakh, beautiful examples, or Myanmar, also very effective examples for citizen design. Then citizen science, I will switch over it quickly because we saw it. But again, citizen science is very practical. Also, sometimes it's not only collecting data, but it's also building the applications to collect the data. Examples from India you saw, or here from culture, the Welttheater in Einsiedeln, where the scientist, the author, wrote a piece, and then the people of the village, more than 500, participated, but not only participated, engaged and changed the whole piece. So it was a citizen science and citizen design piece. And finally, design science. This is the condensed way of collecting scientific knowledge, which was the start of all the cycles we did in AI and architecture 40 years ago, because we tried to take this condensed knowledge from books, from people, and put it into our expert systems and precedent-based design systems. And so that is 40 years ago, but the design science, the condensed knowledge of the design science is important. It's in libraries, in books, they go back hundreds and thousands of years. And with those taking out these rules, using these rules then to make shape grammars, you can design and redesign and newly design beautiful buildings like this. So governance, citizen design science is a theoretical thing, but it's also very practical. And in this, I want to go a bit quicker. Example from a place with the guided democracy, a mega city, Singapore. It's a city with more than 7,000 inhabitants per square kilometer, very high density. And you can see a mixture here between jungle and the city in the back. And there, about 10, 12 years ago, we did the Citizen Design in Practice project, and also published that in Singapore, of course, and in China. And we used the Tanjung Pagar part of Singapore, where the harbor is now the huge container harbor, which has to be moved or is being moved 10 kilometers to the west, and the whole area can be redesigned. And we worked with people and a local NGO for translation, because we cannot do that directly, and had people really design the residential, the greenery, the research, the commercial, and the park connectors. And in parallel, we had them use also a software that we developed for them for our huge, massive open online courses. And with this software, we saw the proposals for this area from the global design people who planted all the buildings and so on right on the seaside. And then from the Singapore citizen design people, we had a different design. And there we could see very strongly how the Singaporeans knew the climate and why they didn't put this huge building on the seafront. And so there is a really introduction of local knowledge into the design. The other end of it is Einsiedeln, the tiny village, even a suburb of Einsiedeln called Egg, where we really go to the citizens and design with them the Richtplanung for their area, so strategy, planning, land use, and go into the citizen. We get from the Bezirk these big plans. Okay, this is where you will be, and this is how it will be used, but the people don't really understand what it is. So we go together, we make these plans, we go by foot on these areas that are to be planned, and then the citizens, of course, this is the tiny village, they take drones, they take away all the buildings, and they say, okay, let's restart from scratch. And then they say the Zukunft of Egg, the future of Egg. We collected them a big document, 26 pages, where they made proposals and so on. They also designed into the existing industrial zone how they want to have it in the future, how they want to reuse it. And then with that, we go to the Bezirk and we show them what we want. And that then is setting into a process of not only co-design, but really active design of the future. So the purpose of governance, again, is living together in an environment of safety and trust, culture and joy. And the last one is not to be forgotten. The second one is responsiveness. Responsiveness is citizen-centered development of cities beyond smart cities. And if you don't have that responsiveness, if you do it like in Brasilia, 1957, design without people, you have then decades to fix existing design and building to the reality that people can live in it. And another example where it is not used now is the NEOM project in Saudi Arabia, because there is no citizen engagement from the people who live there, obviously. So citizen engagement, the responsive city, what we call this, citizen engagement plus smart city technology plus artificial intelligence. And important, intelligent response to what is happening in the city, plus responsibility of the individual person in the city. For this, we had citizen design science tools developed for the responsive city. We made this MOOC, this massive open online course, started already 12 years ago on future cities, livable cities, smart cities, responsive cities. In the end, there were 189,000 subscriptions. And these students actually did citizen science because they collected data all over the world under the guidance of our researchers. And there were too many answers, so we started to collect images as answers to the questions. And we gave them the citizen design platform. We programmed that for them. They could do all the design for the exercises on that one. And it started to become a teaching-driven research. Citizens voted on the design because sometimes there were 20,000 people in one class. And then that was seen, and that was the decisive notion to pass or not pass the course. The important thing was it came back after a few years. Knowledge retransfer from these places that took these courses, bringing it back to Switzerland, or founding new places like Cidades Responsivas Institutes here in Brazil, the other Portuguese word for responsive cities, which now plan cities in Brazil. It's all focused in this little book, City in Your Hands. So remember, responsiveness for us is the world's most livable cities, that they are responsive cities. Final point, generativity. That's very strange. Purpose is to move beyond sustainability towards systems generating more than they need. More food, more knowledge, more energy, more finances, more help to overcome the stalemate that we are in. This is done mostly by the Future Cities Lab Global at the moment, which is now merging into the next generation of the Future City Lab in Singapore and at ETH Zurich. And in the beginning of this Future City Lab, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, we focused on the urban metabolism and to understand the city as a dynamic and complex system. And of course, these stocks and flows and the circular economy are very closely related. And we recognized urban stocks as basic elements of the urban metabolism and as locally available resources. And that was the start of the circular economy for our research. We focus on the small, the medium, and large scale. And the stocks we looked at space, energy, materials, people, capital, water, and information were very many people working at the very focused on this research. A few examples for Switzerland for generativity. Energy generativity, generate more than you need and sell. The enabler, for example, in Switzerland is the Energiegesetz, a good business model and fair distribution. So Grimsel pump power, hydropower plant with the old turbines, the new turbines, and the absolute fantastic business model to produce this power and sell this power when the price of electricity is highest at the market, or generative settlement system on the small scale, surplus energy, knowledge, food, finances to increase citizen health, for example, in agriculture with photovoltaic, with biogas, or in houses that generate 3 times as much energy as they need. These houses and this agricultural part that you saw, I developed myself with others. Or most important, I think, generative in a way, the fair AI urban design and planning approach we developed over time with to improve procedural fairness with citizen design science in the software programs that we developed. And a small example also here at ETH Zurich, that was our first example, the Science City project, 2003 to 2008, generative citizen design science project for Switzerland and Europe. So starting from the existing situation to networking all the functions, to keeping the wonderful environment, and then to export this model to Singapore, to India, and also to build this energy network of ETH Science City to store the heat from the summer for the winter, take it out in the winter with huge heat pumps and reducing the footprint of Science City tremendously. Last example, case study, Cooling Singapore. This was laying the foundations for generativity. Singapore, as you know, from a jungle to this situation today, lots of people working on this project. Singapore is growing, is reclaiming land. The land is industrialized. The heat is increasing all the time. But we could go really deep down into the data of Singapore, energy in on the left, energy out on the right, and then start to move the whole modeling of the city from the real world to digital twins to what-if scenarios to actually planning scenarios for the city. with an approach that we call the federation of models, because there's so many different models now involved in this. And with these models, then we can predict, of course, the vulnerability of places in Singapore where people should or should not be in heat waves. And everybody could also observe and see how these heat waves and this urban heat island effect is affecting the city. You see 4 o'clock in the morning, where it's red, it's hotter than it should be. 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, when the cars are driving to work, release more heat into the system, and then some breeze is coming from the sea. That's why the Singaporeans don't want to have high rises on their coast. And then in the evening, in the afternoon, cars come back and release more heat into the system. But even in the evening and night, the urban heat island effect is too strong and causes lots of health damages. Okay, come to conclusions. In the old days, we had the scales, the building, village, neighborhoods, town, city. And my big hope is really that in the future, that complexity science can overcome many of these scaling problems, and that we have a complexity science aided urban design in the future. The future living space needs to be livable, responsive, and generative. Good governance, economic strength, generative energy, and food production are key. We have so many examples in the past, from good governance to responsiveness to generativity in Switzerland. But in all of these cases, the interactive design support by responsive citizens is crucial. Thank you very much.